Most people know that India was once a British colony, just like many other parts of the world. What fewer people realize, however, is that Britain never fully unified India under a single centralized administration. Instead, British-controlled India was a patchwork. Around 60% of the territory was under direct British rule, while the remaining 40% consisted of more than 500 so-called princely states. These princely states were governed by local rulers, Maharajas, Nawabs, and other hereditary leaders, many of whose families had held power long before the British arrived. Each princely state had a separate treaty or agreement with the British Crown, granting Britain control over key matters such as foreign policy and defense, but otherwise allowing a wide range of autonomy. Legally, these were independent states, albeit under British paramountcy. As such, it would seem logical that once Britain would depart from the Indian subcontinent, these states would simply continue to exist, regaining full sovereignty. However, as you all know, this was not the case, and instead they were all annexed into India and Pakistan. But given that rulers, especially monarchs whose dynasties have ruled for centuries, rarely give up power easily, this begs the question of, what happened to the Indian princely states? Why didn't any of them form independent states of their own? Firstly, we need to understand why Britain even permitted the princes to stay in power. Initially, British policy under the East India Company was aimed at eventually taking direct control of all of India, similarly to how it colonized other regions. A key policy here was the doctrine of lapse, which allowed the British to annex any princely state where the ruler died without a male heir. This policy, among other grievances, fueled widespread discontent and was a major contributing factor to the Indian Rebellion of 1857. In the aftermath of the revolt, the British Crown took control of India from the East India Company. The British government abandoned the policy of annexation, realizing that the princely states could serve as a crucial line of defense against future uprisings. Many princes had remained loyal to the British during the rebellion, and the new policy was to support them as a bulwark of colonial rule. This system of indirect rule was also cheaper and more practical, allowing the British to govern vast territories through existing local leaders with fewer European officials. During the early 20th century, India's independence movement began to grow, and it had to take a stance on the existence of separate entities in India. Initially, the Indian National Congress adopted a policy of non-interference in the internal affairs of the princely states, viewing them as separate entities. Mahatma Gandhi, in his early years of leadership, held a somewhat positive view of the princes, seeing them as potential trustees of their people and an example of India's capacity for self-rule. However, by the 1920s and 30s, this perspective began to shift dramatically against the background of the rise of nationalist sentiments within the princely states. The Indian National Congress, influenced by leaders like Jawaharlal Nehru, started to see the princely states as an obstacle to a unified, democratic India. In 1929, Nehru declared that the people of the states, not the rulers, must determine their own future. And in 1939, the party officially abandoned its policy of non-intervention, asserting that complete independence for India included the princely states, which were considered integral parts of the nation. Gandhi came to see the princes as puppets of the British and their rule as detrimental to their people. He and other leaders feared that if the states became independent, it would lead to the Balkanization of India. With the British departure in 1947, their paramountcy over the princely states lapsed. The states were theoretically free to join either India or Pakistan or to become independent. Logically, this raised the possibility of the princes uniting to pursue their independence or creating a third independent state. However, a united princely front failed to materialize. The states were deeply fragmented by size, wealth, and historical rivalries. The Chamber of Princes, a body meant to represent them, was ineffective and paralyzed by internal squabbles. In addition, the British offered no support for a princely coalition, leaving the states isolated and vulnerable. Sensing this weakness, the leaders of the new Indian government, particularly the first Deputy Prime Minister and Home Minister, Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel, were determined to integrate these states into India. He employed a combination of diplomatic persuasion and political pressure. To sweeten the deal, the rulers were offered generous privy purses and the right to retain their titles. This was the carrot, but there was also a stick: the implicit threat of military action. Leaders like Nehru had made it clear that India would not tolerate hostile independent states on its borders and that no state could militarily defy the Indian army. While the vast majority of states acceded peacefully under this pressure, a few, notably Junagadh, Hyderabad, and Jammu and Kashmir, resisted. In Junagadh, a coastal state with a Hindu majority, the Muslim Nawab decided to accede to Pakistan despite having no land border with it. India called the move a violation of geographical and democratic principles, imposed an economic blockade, and supported a provisional government formed by Junagadh's citizens. Faced with a collapse of his rule, the Nawab fled, and a subsequent plebiscite showed overwhelming support for joining India. Hyderabad, the largest and wealthiest princely state, presented a graver challenge. Its Muslim Nizam dreamed of an independent nation in the heart of India. His ambitions were backed by a violent militia, the Razakars, who terrorized the Hindu majority. After more than a year of failed negotiations, India launched Operation Polo in September 1948. The Indian Army swiftly defeated the Nizam's forces in a 5-day operation, securing the integration of its most defiant state. The case of Jammu and Kashmir was the most complex. The state, with its Muslim majority and Hindu Maharaja, Hari Singh, was geographically vital to both India and Pakistan. The Maharaja initially hoped to remain independent. His hand was forced when Pakistan-backed Pashtun tribesmen invaded in October 1947. In a desperate bid to save his kingdom, Hari Singh appealed to India for military aid, which was granted on the condition that he sign the Instrument of Accession to India. This led to the First Indo-Pakistani War and left the state divided by a ceasefire line, creating a conflict that endures to this day. With that, the princely states had been brought under control, and in 1971, Prime Minister Indira Gandhi passed the 26th Amendment to the Constitution, abolishing the privy purses and revoking all official titles, severing the last formal ties to India's feudal past. Ultimately, none of the 565 princely states managed to remain independent. Yet, the story of integration had one final chapter. The Kingdom of Sikkim had remained a protectorate of India, not a full state. After years of rising popular demand to end the monarchy, a referendum was held. In 1975, Sikkim formally abolished its monarchy and became the 22nd state of India, completing the long and complex process of unifying the subcontinent under a single republic. Thank you for watching, and a big thank you to my supporter on Patreon, Rostislav1917.